Hey everybody, welcome to the Hisessions Hawai podcast where we talk about everything local and beyond. I'm Johnny Masato, your host, and joining me today is just Kyle Shimabukuro.
How's it?
Devon is out doing things, so we're happy for him.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, getting things done. Before we begin, let me remind our listeners of all the ways they can stay in touch with the show. There is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Hisessions. You can go to SoundCloud, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts to listen to the podcast. Finally, you can email us at hisessions@yahoo.com. If you'd like to help the show get more music on the channel, please go to patreon.com and donate. There you get more involved with the show, help determine who and what is filmed. We actually don't have any patrons this week, but we've had a good run of patrons.
Oh, yeah?
I'm pretty happy. Yeah, I mean...
Thank you for your support, guys.
Yeah, I think we did a lot of things. We did a couple live streams this year, and we've been more active on like Instagram and stuff. So I think that plays into people
And you're planning a busier 2025, too.
Yeah, great. Super excited.
I'm hoping to be part of that too.
Yeah.
Sure can.
Hopefully, yes. Okay, Kupu Kupu Landscaping, Landscape Architects. We'd like to thank them for sponsoring the show. Call Kevin Yokomura at 808-722-8685 for a free estimate. Or go to kupukupulandscaping.com. And, of course, Fort Ruger Market. I broke down today and had a Rugerlicious Poke Bowl, which is my second Rugerlicious Poke Bowl this week after not having for like a couple months. So Mercury Rising, that's what we'll title this episode. You can find Kyle at highlifeclothing.com. And without further ado, we'd like to introduce our guest for today, Mr. Billy Say.
Hey.
How's it, everybody?
Billy is a musician. Oh, dang it. I left your bio out in my phone on the thing, but
You want me to go grab it?
no, it's okay. But you're a man of many talents. Not only a musician, you can do voice acting.
Yeah.
You do. You have your own. Well, we're gonna talk mostly about the general music industry and what you're doing to try to support artists here that are doing the work, man. Getting out there and playing gigs and entertaining people here locally.
Yes.
And so that was our impetus of us meeting and talking a little bit. And we said, hey, come on the podcast. And you were like, sure. And
Yeah,
here we are.
I'm actually really excited to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about your history and how you even got here. You come from a musical family, correct?
So actually, I should clarify that. It's not so much a purely musical family so much as a media family.
That's true. Yes, you are correct.
I am the first one that I know of that actually makes most of my money on the actual performance of music's side. A lot of it for Dad was the man of 1,000 voices locally. Okay, if you grew up here enough, you would know KHON2, Hawaii's news channel with Joe Moore. Coming up next on Wheel of Fortune. They were called the Daybooks, and I would go in with him.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I would go in with him as a young child. We would go record the Daybooks, and I haven't had this memory in a long time, but at the end of it, he would like record a little message for the guy that would put all the stuff together and be like, all right, that's the Daybooks for October 22nd, 2024. It's Bill and Little Billy saying mahalo. And I would go, aloha. And that would be, our thing. And we would do that, several times a week.
That's awesome, man.
Would do all the celebrity voices that you would hear on the radio. And now, if you really want to go far back, Dad was fun fact, he was the last recorded voice that anybody heard that they thought was Aku. The old radio broadcaster.
Yeah. Oh, hey folks, Jay Aku Popole.
Aku was in the hospital with throat cancer, and he was dying, and he wrote a final message to the people of Hawaii, and he had my father record that message in his voice. And everybody thought it was Aku because my dad did Aku that well. And so, my dad, that was all like way before I was born. So my parents met in, I think it was the old KGU. Mom, Dad, I could be mistaken on exactly which station it was, but I was born into KPOI 98.5 in the 1980s, which was a wild time. And Mom was the first creative director in Hawaii radio, and so she would plan all the parties. So my first concert that I ever went to was John Bon Jovi. I think I was like 1 and a couple months at
you
the
must have saw
at
a
the
lot of
Blaisdell.
good concerts back then.
I don't
Well,
necessarily
not remember it,
them
but you were
all.
there.
Yeah, but I was definitely around for them. I was like exposed to that world, and so like the world of. And then I grew up. My parents split, and Mom moved me to New York City, and she got a job for one of the conglomerated radio groups. And then the same formula happened all over the country, where it's like there's only a handful of owners, and there'd be like 6 big stations, like today iHeartMedia, formerly Clear Channel,
right.
would all be. So I'd be walking down the halls, and this is kind of why I am the way I am musically. There were like 6 different major genres in one little. So I'd hear all the stuff, and that led me eventually to. Just when I started picking up an instrument, it's like, well, I know this song, and I know this song, and I just kind of have such a deep love for all of them. So one of the things that makes me who I am as a musician is my range and my versatility, and it's all just because of the exposure that I had growing up.
Those days, I remember my buddy Mark Santos, who we should get in here at one time because he's back from those days. He was into the scene back then. I was a young kid, 10 years old, playing. He was my keyboard teacher and took me into the studio one day to watch radio, and it was a very, very young Chris Hart. He had just started. Crash K Aloha was there.
Wow.
And they're doing stuff, and it just looked like so much fun back then, They called, while I was there, they called the New Kids on the Block hotline. Because New Kids on the Block was a big deal, and then they wanted to get content, so they called the hotline and played the recording on the radio and stuff. It was I just thought I wanted to be in radio back in those days, and even as a Pure Heart days, I would love to go into the radio station, just hang out and talk. It just was always so much. Seems like so much fun,
And to be honest, back then it was so much more relevant than it feels like it is today. And that's one of the things that we'll get to in this conversation about like what's kind of happened to the industry. And so for my roots, not that I was really like an active participant, I was just sort of like a young observer of a time in, Hawaii's media and broadcast scene where the people that were part of it just by virtue of the lack of other available options, right, were so much more relevant and so much more important. And it fueled these eras that I'm going to talk a little bit more about, because you only had so many media choices, generally speaking. And the island, which still remains small, was way more focused on a few different things. You know what I mean? So if you were part of that, everybody and their grandma literally knew you, and it was... It had more to it. And I mean, that was the same story all over the country for the most part. But I think it's even more uniquely prevalent in Hawaii because of how our culture, how we kind of have this common shared experience of what happens here kind of all throughout the islands. Now the internet changed a lot of things, of course. We're kind of going to get to that too. But the way that things used to be, Hawaii used to sort of be set back in its own little time capsule. Like there was a time when Hawaii was like 6 months to a year behind everyone else on the mainland in terms of the things that we had or whatever. And
trends, fads, everything.
All the stuff.
Fashion.
Even physical items. That's food thing or whatever. And I mean, to this day, still like TV programs or whatever. Now you can kind of see things live, but you used to have to wait for the recording and nobody would know what would happen with the game. You know what I mean? So it's been... for me now to come up I'm 41 and a few months, and to come up into this scene now of entertainment in general as primarily a live musician, also a luau host and MC. Shout out to my friends at Malu Productions and the Aloha Kai Luau every Friday. I'm there hosting that. And also my voice client, the Wedding Ring Shop. They can make diamonds a part of your life. All these different things that I do now we're all competing for people's attention. in a way that we didn't necessarily have to as hard before.
Yeah.
And that's what started to change the landscape of things and made it more difficult. And so coming back to this group, I started what I titled GMAO, which stands for the Gigging Musicians Association of Hawaii. I started it on January 1st of this year. I was sick after covering too many gigs leading up to the end of the year, and I have a gig every Monday. It's my longest running residency at Kuhio Food Hall in International Marketplace. I had to cancel it, and I've been doing this group text with a bunch of other musicians, just sort of talking about some things. I was like, guys, what if we had like a place where there could be more than like 6 of us to just sort of like talk
about this stuff,
talk about ideas and whatever. And I was like, you know what? What if we called it this? So I was off, and I was like, how easy is it to start a Facebook group? And I've been clear from the beginning with everybody there, like, okay, I started the fire, so to speak, but this is not my group. I don't own this. Like, I have a lot of other people that I've made administrators and moderators because I want this to be a group effort. I was just one person that frankly sort of sees myself as lower down in the hierarchy from some of the other people that do this, that just felt like we needed a place to be able to gather together safely and talk about things. Like, I've put up posts about like, hey, I'm going to buy this new speaker, and there's this other option. Does anybody have experience with using this one versus that one? Why should I go with this one? And, there was like a flurry of comments there. Or like tips, like tips versus last year. I really think it was the Lahaina fires. Like, we had a really not so great holiday season. It's usually like bumping. And even this past summer was like, where's all the people? And so I was like, are anybody else having this experience of like, is anybody making way less money in tips? Like, is something wrong with me? And people were like, no, dude, I've been playing.
Well, dude, I mean, just tips. How do you even get tips now is a big question, because before it's pretty straightforward. People had cash. They would tip you in
now
cash.
It's credit cards.
Now it's like, do you put a Venmo sign up?
better
Like,
have
I don't even know. Yeah, this is and it's a very interesting topic to me, because I did come up in these ranks. People think about Pure Heart and those days, and they just know when the album came out and from then on, right? They don't know the 4 years of Jake and I playing coffee shops and small gigs and whatever we could basically do to survive. And I've been out of that scene for a long time too, so I'm kind of curious. I'm surprised that there's so many places to play, because I've even asked out, like, hey, is there places to gig that pays a decent amount, and just to get up my chops up and get out there. And it's kind of there's kind of crickets out there. But the fact that there are bands and artists out there that are gigging constantly and stuff like that, there is a scene out there, just that I'm not a part of it, and you are right in smack in the middle of it. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to have you come on and talk about a little bit of that. So where do we start? Okay, so you have the group, and this is to start to talk about tips on getting out there and playing. Now, when did you start? Because you were in New York. How long have you been actively just gigging around town here? Like, when did you come back and start that life?
So I've been back here in Hawaii since 2006 full time, after my grandfather passed away. So I am, just to clarify a little bit of family history, I'm Billy Sage V, which stands for William Hampton Sage V. My dad was the man of 1,000 voices, Bill Sage IV, doing all the radio things. My grandpa was Dr. William H. Sage III. He was the chief of staff of the Queen's Medical Center twice in the 1980s, and the president of the Hawaii Heart Association. And he brought our family out here to Hawaii at the end of I guess sort of like the middle of the Cold War or something like that. And they bought a corner lot in Kahala and settled down. I was born here. I lived here till I was 9 full time. And then when mom and dad split, and mom took me and my younger brother Mark hey Mark, love you bud, to New York, we would do school years over there and summers over here. Okay. So in many ways, it's kind of like I never left. But then after some time doing college in Washington, D.C. that didn't quite pan out all the way, grandpa passed away, and I decided I wanted to come back home. And the first thing that I did was work in radio. So I worked for both Salem Media and what was then Clear Channel in succession. I worked in sales. I worked in the traffic department for like putting commercials on the air. I actually worked as Jason Yotsuda's traffic manager early morning for the Perry and Price show thing. And then I found music was always kind of this thing that I did for my own sort of therapeutic enjoyment. Kamuela talked about this last show about his son, and I was like, don't say this, don't say, but I was like, maybe I could. I'm high functioning autistic, formerly known as Asperger's, and I never took music lessons. My dad actually gave me an ukulele for my 18th birthday, and I just took that summer with the ukulele and the chord book, and I listened to the radio, including some of your songs, and I just started. I just started like, what's this do? How's that work? And then I just kind of kept playing until my sound disappeared into the music, and I could really just sort of feel it. So it was always there. And then honestly, I had some health struggles, mostly having to do with like brain injuries and stuff like that. And fortunately, I'm in a much better place now. But doing music gigs with friends of mine kind of on the side was the only thing that I could really do consistently here and there to make some money outside of a normal job. It's like kind of you go there, you work for like 3 hours kind of thing. It is tiring, but then, that's it. And I had a skill for it. So I then came back to the scene in a more intentional, focused way, to where now I could say I'm like kind of full time about 2 years ago. And it was after I got a nasal surgery. I had like a deviated septum and some stuff, and I would lose my voice after like 3 hours of singing kind of thing. And once I got that fixed, I feel
like I would lose my voice after 3 hours of singing too.
Did your voice change after that operation, or is it
a little bit, but
in what way?
Definitely for the better. So like I would have kind of used to have like a little bit more of like I can't really mimic it. Like there was a nasality happening that was fixed through that. And I just have more fullness of breath and resonance. It's just very slight and subtle. Okay. But
it's one of those things like you probably wouldn't hear it as an audience member, but
you would know the difference.
Yeah. As the singer, as a performer, you hear it.
You can feel it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I've been doing this now for about 2 years in a more. People always knew of me. My friend. Shout out to my friend Dustin Park. Who's
an amazing singer, by the way.
Okay, you know him.
Yeah, he's been on the show, and I was like, whoa, man, this guy's really good.
Yeah, he was one of my early mentors, and is still somebody that I look up to, and is like a homie. And he gave me this nickname that I kind of forgot about, but I'm pretty proud of. He calls me the Unicorn. Because I would just show up out of nowhere and put on a great show and do all kinds of songs that didn't look like it should come out of a guy that looks like this. and that was just kind of like my moniker to him. But yeah, I've gotten into doing this on a more professional, and there's things that you figure out when you start doing this more full time that aren't apparent when it's just a little side thing.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm kind of curious about, because when I talk to friends, I'm amazed at that. I'm not amazed. I shouldn't say amazed, but I'm like, wow, there is a way to like, I always thought that there was a, you gig and then you release an album and then you there's a progression here, but there are guys that are just full-time musicians and they find their niche and their way to work, and they do pretty well. They can make a living doing it, and I just never saw that side of it, and so kind of curious about that.
Yeah, it's definitely possible to do, and I think now I can't necessarily speak to a certain gap of years, but I guess this would be the first opportunity to introduce this theory of the eras. So when I grew up, I was born in 1983.
Young man.
Yeah, well, I don't know about it anymore. But there was a time that there were these legends that I heard of, these stories of how there were all these showrooms everywhere in Waikiki, and they all had full bands multiple times a day with like, and I don't mean just like a 4-piece, like, like the 3 or 4-piece was considered like the small act. There was like a keyboard player and a horn section, and they all had sound guys. And if you're listening to this, a sound guy is a professional. I'm just kidding, because it's so rare anymore that anybody has a budget for. I know
For a
like
sound guy.
3, 4
Yeah.
working sound guys, and they're all great, and I could name them all, and they're all cool. But the whole scene had so much more budget in it for everybody to kind of go around. And so I think that was a time where there were again a lot fewer media options too. And that's what I call the golden era.
Well, yeah, I guess you couldn't go like, oh, I want to catch Henry Capono, but I'll just go watch him on YouTube when I get home.
Yeah.
You gotta
It
go.
didn't
You gotta
exist.
go, right?
Right, no,
because it wasn't on. Your television was appointment viewing too. So if you're gonna see Henry Capono on television, it's gonna be as a special. It's gonna run for that half an hour, and then that's it. You're not gonna see it.
Yeah.
So if you really want to see him, you gotta go down and
Yeah, like the
watch.
Call Upon Us CNK concert at the show back in the days. That was like a big event. Like,
Yeah.
because you don't get to see them too often, you know?
Right.
And we still have that level of things that happen. You know, there are definitely still big events, but they aren't as, maybe they're not quite as frequent as they used to be.
Yeah. I think it's, don't you think it's because just music in general is more accessible
Yeah.
at home?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like, you can watch everything at home now. So people going,
Why
I don't
leave
want to
your
sit in the
couch?
shell in a hot sun and fight traffic and find parking when I can just watch them play live.
That's
you know,
true.
Right.
On my computer and air conditioning, you know?
Right. So then you had this era after that was marked by the Japanese economy crashing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that my father particularly, who had a lot more gigs as he was like a comedic impersonator too for like theme parties and stuff like that. And so a lot of that stuff dried up, and we used to have signs everywhere in Waikiki that were also in Japanese. Right, because
that's
we
right.
had
Yeah.
so many Japanese visitors. It was such a huge part of our economy. And then when their economy crashed, it never came back the same way as we had it before. So that began what I call the silver era, which is where I think people like Kelly Boy and your group came up, where there were more forms of emerging new media,
Yeah.
but there was still a culture of
People
deep
going to the
appreciation.
concerts and stuff to see.
Yeah,
it.
and it was like when you got on the radio back then,
Yeah.
that was making it.
It was
you
a
know,
big deal.
and
Yeah.
everybody knew it, and you weren't fighting for all these different distribution sources, which to me, I'm not really there in terms of trying yet, but it's intimidating to want to make the investment and to want to make the effort, because it's like, is this gonna pay off? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you don't really know.
Dude, I've been doing this for 30 years and I still have that apprehension at this point, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it was inspiring actually to hear Kamuela's episode where
Yeah,
he told
yeah.
the story about the song that he produced
Yeah.
that ended up getting like picked up on a part of TikTok, and then like
Yep.
it's getting like millions and millions of plays, and there's
And
actual royalties that
super
can come
popular
from
in the
that.
Philippines.
Right, I heard that part
Yeah.
too, and that, speaking of the Philippines, shout out to my whole Philippines virtual assistant team. You guys are all awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you for helping me with my website and my music development and
This-
stuff like that.
Just go back real quick to the Facebook page that you created.
Yes.
And you guys talk about like equipment and kind of like little tips and stuff here and there. Is it also a place where you go, man, I'm sick tonight, I can't play this gig, can somebody fill in? kind
It's
of thing, too?
happened. Yeah. To be honest, there's not as much like deep engagement with this yet as I initially hoped that there might be. But there's definitely those moments that happen. We also have some different group chats. The administrators
Yeah.
and the moderators have like one chat, and there's like a general chat. And so it has come up that I actually did it myself, where I was like, hey, I have another private show. I need somebody to cover my gig at Tex 808 on Saturday. And people would be like, hey, I'll do it.
Yeah, I
People
can
would
totally see
be
that
in the
as something
comments.
super useful for you guys. Where
Yeah.
there's a calendar of events every month, and there might even be a venue that's looking for a talent that you guys can get access to now, and
Right.
that your other musician friends know about.
There's a ton of potential for it. And
Yeah.
honestly, I should say at this point also that we have turned away like twice as many members as we've let in, because I created, along with the rest of the moderators and administrators, a really, really strict rule of confidentiality, because this needs to be a safe space for us. So it's listed right there on the front page. We have 4 questions. You need to answer all the questions. I don't care who you are. If you don't answer the questions, we're just not letting you in. And I've seen people that have answered some of the questions, but not all of the questions, and specifically just no answer on the confidentiality part. And I'm like,
What's the 4 questions? Can I ask you what it is?
It's one, will you agree to keep our group and what is said in here confidential from outsiders, especially the like agencies and other kind of powers that be and venues and booking people that might judge us for this reason or that reason.
Let me make this clear. There's no managers on this thing then. Like,
correct. We
it's
actually
just actual
They're all
artists.
gigging musicians.
It's all the artists. The only exception to that would be people that I call allies, which would be somebody like, here's an example. I don't know if she's even in there, but Linda Bade, that like produces stuff for like Japanese products and has like her own radio thing and like really has been helpful to promoting us artists. Like we'd let somebody like her in, or I don't think he's in there either, but an example would be like Bill Hale, the photographer that's gone out and taken a lot of photos of us at our gigs and stuff like that, which is super useful. Or one of the sound guys, you know what I mean? You guys can be in because you're going to work with us. You're going to be an associate with us. You're not in any position to necessarily, you know, giveth or taketh away kind of thing. Because it can be very challenging in this scene where we are on a small island that, you know, you have one bad night or you say something a little bit that somebody takes the wrong way and then suddenly like you're not getting opportunities or whatever. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is simply identifying places that you have. Excuse me, that's question number 3. Question number 2 is, are you a gigging musician or one of those types of allies that I mentioned specifically, like this, like that, whatever? Just that's pretty simple, yes or no. The third question is, would you please list at least 3 places in the state that you've played? And gosh, off the top of my head, now suddenly I'm having trouble remembering the fourth question, but
it's always how it goes.
Yeah, but the first 3, obviously the most important, and I've had people that actually we have let in because they've answered all the questions that are saying, honestly, I haven't really been here to play before, but I just moved here. I'm a musician from another state. I want to find places to gig, or I'm just getting into the scene. I'm looking for connecting with other people or looking for open mics or whatever. But they answer all the other questions correctly, and me or another member sort of check them out, vet them, make sure they're kind of who they say they are. We let them in.
Do you upload like portfolio of your performances and stuff just to see what the kind of genre these
I've seen some people that have done that. There are people that will put up like flyers of their gigs kind of thing, or there's a guy that's been putting up like he shares like his live stream of his gig kind of thing. All of that stuff is cool, and we want to have people do that. So I mean, if you're seeing this and you asked to join and you weren't let in for whatever reason, it was probably just because you didn't answer at least the confidentiality question, you know, in affirmative enough a way that we felt safe.
And can you repeat the Facebook page for those who are listening?
Again, the Facebook page is GMAO, or the Gigging Musicians Association of Hawaii.
On Facebook.
On Facebook.
Okay. You got any Instagram and any other social media?
We don't have an Instagram presence as of this point. I just went with Facebook because it seemed like the most ubiquitous platform that would allow for group creation.
For what he's trying to do, that makes more the most sense.
But if we had the membership work the right way, then I'd like to be able to expand it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and it functions as sort of an adjunct to the Musicians Union, who I actually tried to reach out to in preparation for coming on the show, and I didn't hear back from anybody there, because there is a Musicians Union in Hawaii, but it's generally speaking, to my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, and I want to be educated if I am, it seems like it's mostly just for like symphony orchestra players or people that do like higher level like movies or you know, like film score, stuff like that. And I, to the best of my knowledge, you have to only accept jobs that pay like a union wage. And I don't think very many of the ones on the gigging scene do that. So if you want to be able to make that living, you're kind of caught there. In an ideal world, I'd like to see that Musicians Union create a second tier for the rest of us to be able to go play at the rates that we're getting and have some of the same types of protection. But for the moment, this is sort of like the next best thing.
Okay. So I have a question. As someone who's out there nowadays, you were mentioning over lunch that COVID, you know, obviously stopped the whole gigging scene, But now that you're out there, are you seeing that scene come back where venues are looking for live performers and entertainers and things like that?
In a big way, yes. I use the analogy of like a gigantic wave that cleared out the lineup, you know what I mean, out in the ocean kind of thing. And that gigantic wave was like COVID, and everybody got washed far away. And then once the seas calmed, so to speak, and some good waves came back, meaning like opportunities, venues, places like that, there weren't as many musicians that came back to the lineup, so to speak. I think a lot of people either moved away or they were forced to find other occupational, other means of making their money, right? That they figured out like, oh, this is a sort of a better use of my time economically than I was doing music. And then all of a sudden there were a lot of venues, the venues that did survive, because, you mentioned like, didn't a lot of them go away because of COVID? Yes, but for all those empty spaces, somebody picked them up and kind of popped up back in their place. And the ones that survived also, they're all basically looking for quality music again. And it kind of created a little bit of a player's market. Where there are now, at least according to my friend Jason Laeja, hi Jason, hopefully you're in this seat pretty soon. There's, in many ways, there's kind of more opportunities for quality, consistent musicians.
That's great to hear, because in recent times, you'd be like, where can we go listen to music? And you gotta go to Waikiki somewhere in a hotel to kind of hear somebody. Where when we were listening back in the day, you could just choose where you want to go, from Malia's Cantina all the way down to like Monterey Bay Canners to Kincaid's. I mean, now I'm glad to hear the resurgence of that kind of venues opening up for people to actually listen to, performances and stuff.
It's tough to say that it's necessarily quite the same level all over town as it might have been back then. I think Kaka'ako still has some stuff going on.
Yeah.
Chinatown still has some things happening, but it is largely centralized in Waikiki. I play out in Hawaii Kai at Tex 808 on Saturdays, and they also just opened the lounge at Island Sound Studios, and a speakeasy venue that I'm actually going to be doing my debut performance November 30th, along with Ambrose Buck, the awesome saxophone and horn extraordinaire, flute, and all kinds of different things.
I like that venue because it's right by my house.
Yeah, come check us out.
November
November 30th.
On the east side, even B-side.
Yeah, B-side.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the other one that I know of on the east side of the island that regularly offers live music.
So maybe it's my fault.
I
haven't been looking hard. Well, okay. So my experience has been, and I won't name any names, but and this is pre-COVID. I haven't really been playing since. I was one of the ones that got swept away and never came back, I guess. But before that, I was like, you know what? I better work on my solo performance because I've been playing with groups forever. So I called a buddy of mine and like, can you give me a gig? And I was playing at this one venue, but they would pay me $90, maybe it was $100 for a couple hours or 2.5 hours or something like that. It was in Waikiki. So I had free valet parking, but I had to tip the valet every time. So maybe that's how I got to $90.
Is that the one by the pool?
Yeah.
That you're playing?
No. It wasn't by the pool. And then,
this was post-COVID?
This was pre-COVID.
Oh, okay, pre-COVID.
Yeah, pre-COVID. The thing that I didn't like about it, though, is that they wouldn't let me bring a sound system. I had to plug into their system. And I swear, half the time, it wasn't even on. So I'm just playing it, and I'm like, I don't even think there's anyone can even hear me, So I'd go back there, and I didn't want to make a stink about it, but I'd ask the waiter, like, is the speakers on? Because I'd put my looper on, and I'd play something on my guitar, and I'd put my guitar down, walk outside, and like walk around. I'm like, I don't. So it's like, man, if I'm not even like, if I can't even be heard of, why am I even doing this? It's like, by the time I'm walking out of here, it's less than $100. It's my whole Tuesday night.
Right.
I could be doing other things. So then I was kind of like, I don't know if this is worth it, but see, you have good gigs. Like, there are good gigs out there.
Do you bring in your own sound system?
Actually, fortunately for all the ones that I have sort of selected and have become my regular weeklies, which I'm very fortunate to have regular weeklies filling my calendar. Not everybody can do that. they all happen to have overhead house sound systems that I have a way of plugging into. So all I bring is my Bose S1 Plus monitor, and it's got a line out on it, and then I connect that in. So I still have like a pretty full sound that's hitting me and kind of bouncing off a wall and bathing a lot of the place with ambient sound.
Yeah.
But then the rest of it is going into their overheads. But to that point, there's not, when you don't have a dedicated sound guy, suddenly it's going to fall on either you, which is mostly what the venue expects, or some kind of managing, whoever's in
someone
charge
who
of the floor.
works at the restaurant that does not know sound.
Who's also worried in that moment about the guests at the host stand and their escalating wait list and the guys in the kitchen that are back behind this and the what? It's over there. Here, go. I don't know what to do.
But not is for you guys. I mean, I watched you load and set up from back in the day, and I watch you load and set up now.
Yeah.
It's a one-man thing. It's so much easier, right?
Yeah, and that's what made me kind of get back into it, was the fact that the speakers and everything have gotten so much smaller and more efficient, lighter.
Yep.
So, before it was like all these speakers are like 65 to 70 pounds. You're loading them in your car and stuff. This is in the 90s,
Yeah.
But now they're, you could get a decent size and they're all, 25 pounds. Or 30.
But to be sure, it is still a very, and this is something I figured out once I started doing it as often as I did, it's a very athletic endeavor.
That's true.
It does take a lot of energy, even when you're, running. Now, whether you do kind of like a lot of equipment and create like a full band, one-man band sound like I do, which means you're setting up and you're bringing more, or even on the opposite side of it, if you just sit there just strumming an instrument and singing by yourself, boy, that puts a lot of wear on your wrist. Playing those same 4 chords over again.
Sure.
And so it takes, you're tired. It's like, oh, you're just out there working for 2-3 hours, but like, wait, there's more. There's a lot more that goes into the process of getting
Packing
ready.
up,
Is everything
setting
charged?
Up, breaking down.
Right.
Yeah,
Kind of like making sure that you have things, you got to make sure that you look clean and good. And that takes some time.
Yeah,
also.
You're all sweaty setting up your own sound, and you got to play for 3 hours.
I figured out, by the way, I bring my nice Aloha shirt. I show up in an undershirt, set up, go back somewhere, change, check my hair, and then go, instead of just going there, and then I start my set, and I'm like soaked in sweat already, and it's not a good look.
So if somebody goes to a Billy Sage show, what kind of music do you play that you could explain that's going to be like the majority of your set?
It's actually gotten easier for me because of the audiences that I played to recently to define this in a simple soundbite, which is country, rock, and reggae. You're pretty much going to hear mostly some combination of country, rock, and or reggae.
Do you mix it up depending on the audience you see?
Absolutely.
And the venue you're
so
playing?
I don't play the same show twice ever, because actually in between radio and then becoming a musician, I worked in restaurants. I was a host, I was a barback, I was a buzzer, I was a server, I was a bartender in certain places. I did all kinds of different restaurant codes, and I listened to people like the Kailua Bay Buddies.
Kailua Bay
Clayton
Buddies.
Apolanco and Mark Caldera. They gave me my start in Waikiki on what was the Don Ho stage. I got up there. It was right after Michael Jackson died, and they started playing Billie Jean. And then they were like, "We're just kidding. No one can sing that high." And I'm like bussing tables, and I was like, "Me." They're like, really? You think you can? So I came up and I kind of nailed it. And then it suddenly became like a running thing. And then I would just kind of go on and sing a song or two with them every night.
Busboy at the restaurant.
Yeah, and then I became like the server that would keep closing the restaurant. And I'd have people coming back from all over, the world. A year later, would be like, is he still there? Yeah, go up and sing Billie Jean for us again.
Well, and that's the wonderful thing about Waikiki that I feel like doesn't get utilized. It's this idea is that people visit, right?
Yeah.
And I remember there was this guy, I can't even remember his name, but he would outsell almost every local act. You would never know who he is in the 90s CDs, because everyone who came to his show, he'd get their mailing address, and he had this newsletter, and you could order his CDs, and he would just direct mail, and he was making a killing.
Oh, really?
Back in
what kind of music did he play there?
He just played Waikiki, like the regular Waikiki kind of stuff, but he did that for years and years and years. And then, people would fly back and they'd stay in the same hotel and they would come and see him. And there was this other guy, Jamie Lawrence, who's from Maui. And he was a guitar player for Kaylee Rochelle. He did a lot of the guitar work and stuff. beautiful voice, great singer, and yeah, he would just do this hotel scene, and then people would come back, you know, and be like, "Oh, I want to go see Jamie," and then he built his own little following. You know?
That's the kind of creativity that it takes these days that I want to see us apply, and those are the kinds of strategies that worked back then that there are absolutely modern versions of today, like the DistroKid approach and getting your stuff to blow up on social media, that I really want to be able to have this group help to widely disseminate to the other artists out there to figure out some new ways to succeed. Because while, yes, you can make a decent amount of money doing this with inflation being what it is, it's...
Oh yeah, I read in your message to me about this idea. Please elaborate on this because it's important. Back in the 90s, when I used to play gig, I got paid $100 to $150 for 2 hours, 2 hours. What is it now?
Nowadays it's anywhere between $150 and $350 for that same show, depending on who you are.
And what is gas now? And milk.
It's gotten to be a lot more.
So you're basically just getting paid the same, but
paid
inflation.
the same, dude. I'm getting the same amount of gig money when I do these these local gigs.
Yeah, 25, 30 years it was $100 to $150.
Yeah.
And after COVID, enough of us that came back, I think because of what I was talking about with that whole not as many people came back to do it, said, look, if I'm going to keep doing this for you week in and week out, I can't. I can't live on this anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of where some of us that were a little bit better and maybe had slightly bigger followings, or really just the venue knew we were going to drive sales. We were going to bring a consistent show. We were able to get it to an industry standard at the working level of about $100 an hour per stage. But even now, against the inflationary pressures that you're seeing and rents and all this stuff, that's still not really necessarily enough to...
Well, because people
can subsist there, but can you get ahead on that? It's
no, okay, because this is how people look at it, which is incorrect. They go, oh, you're getting paid $100 an hour, 3 hours, $100 an hour. But it's not 3 hours, because if you're playing like 6 to 9, right, you got to get there at least by 5 o'clock to set up the sound system. You have to start loading in at 4, which means you're getting ready. You're starting to get ready at 3:30 or something like that. You drive there, you set up your sound system, you do your gig. It's 3 hours. Then you have to break everything down. You drive home. They have to unload everything back into your car, right? By the time if you're paying 6 to 9, you're not done till like 11:30 at night, and you probably started your day at 4. It's a full day,
depending. Yeah,
right.
No,
so it's not $100 an hour.
And these people that pay you guys for an hourly rate, does it matter how many people you bring in? Is it like per person, per bandmate?
So it used to, but it doesn't really necessarily. It's just because the business isn't there to support it.
So the bigger bands out there are having a hard time getting gigs.
Right.
There's only a very small handful of stages that support an actual band these days.
Yeah.
Right.
You remember back in the day, you'd go to Sheraton and watch Honolulu play, and that's a full band.
Yeah.
Right.
And Society of 7, a full band. Even Hono at one point had a full band.
Full band, yeah.
And I'm sure the compensation was there back in the day too, but now
I
it's
remember there was
hard.
a time when, like, remember Liquids?
Yes.
Liquids would give you a percentage off the bar.
Oh.
Instead, so if you were a band that brought in people that drank, you could make really good money, but it was just based on merit. Like if people came in to see you, great, you make a ton of money. Nobody comes, then you're not making anything,
and then it's your job to promote and market,
right?
too,
And
so,
so I don't know where that model went, because that's not there anymore.
Maybe Liquids wasn't making money by paying you guys in percentage.
No, but they got to be making money, because they're getting a percentage of the profit of the
I guess so,
they
because
had
your
a
band is
baseline
bringing in more customers than normal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a time when that happened, or they would charge a cover at the door. They don't do that anymore. And then you keep the door, and then they keep all the liquor sales or whatever. Right. So,
do you prefer being a one-man band?
It's tough to say, because in some ways, yes, being able to sort of control where the sound goes and what you do in the moment is nice.
Because I noticed you use a looper and stuff like that to kind of fill in.
Yeah, to be able to create the different layers, because I am a multi-instrumentalist. I can drum, I can play bass, I can play guitar, I can solo, I can sing.
So that's a lot of equipment you bring into one gig. Then.
It is, but it allows me to create a full sound that honestly sort of preserves the different parts of my body from overworking, but also allows me to sort of do things creatively and make more of I'm replicating the sound of the record from my head, kind of. I'm mostly doing it for my own enjoyment, and it just so happens that it kind of fills things out nicely, and I think people like that sound. But my friend Kuhio Travis, that I'm hoping will also be sitting in this seat soon, he's the only person that I really did a lot of like duo, and at a certain point we had like a small band going gigs with, and it's really fun to be able to harmonize with another human being.
Yeah,
but we both got, you know, families kind of to support, and it's tough to find a gig that will pay enough for the two of you so that you're not losing money by taking that. Because the other thing is that, we're working for $100 an hour kind of thing, or maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but you can only really do that maybe twice a day and kind of burn yourself out in the process, you know. So there's only so many hours you can work at a time, and there's only so many days a week that you can do that. So if you start to think from like a business perspective, your revenue potential from just doing that, there's kind of a cap on it.
How many gigs do you play a week on average?
Right now, 4 live music gigs and 1 luau. And the luau is nice because all they do is...
And that's spread out throughout the week, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I think a lot of these musicians, and I mean, they should anyway, even back in the day, you know, you have to be creative, right? And not just... You do the live gigs, but then that can lead to other things. You know, you do recordings, you do side jobs and things like that then you do weddings or, you know, events and stuff like that. And that kind of fills in all those little gaps too. So
I remember back in the day, in the 90s maybe, Capena would have like 3 gigs in a day.
I know.
I don't know if they're doing that right now. But
I heard Kelly Boy saying they still have like 5 gigs in a day.
Yeah, it's so crazy. We used to do that too, Pure Heart. It was too much, man. We'd have 3 gigs a day, like 2 days in a row, or, you know, like the whole weekend was just all gigs, like just one to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're at that point, then that's where you want to get to from a business perspective doing this, because then you're killing it financially, and then you better kind of do what Kamuela did and find a way to put that into some kind of passive investment.
You got to strike when the iron is hot too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, do it while you can, for sure.
Well, okay, we got we sorry, it's my fault, but we keep running out. So, because of the time constraints. So, what do you think would be a good, I don't want to say solution, but where should this go in your mind as far as gigging musicians and all that stuff? Like, what would you like to see?
So I want to find some solutions, and I did write a series of more defined talking points that I don't think there's necessarily time to go into all these in detail, but I could really quickly breeze through them.
Yeah, give us the top 5 or something.
So the first thing, and here's like, I'm going to give you sort of 3 main points of the challenges that we're facing now. Number 1, our musicians that are at the daily gig level are making an underappreciated contribution to our state's larger economy. And what I mean by that is I think that the average person doesn't necessarily understand that your visitors come out here to Hawaii, they're spending money on the airlines, they're spending money on their hotels. They're going to probably go out and buy a tour package. And once they've done all that, the last opportunity for us to squeeze the money out of them that we need to fund our schools and our firefighters and all that different stuff, and the freeway and the rail. Let's not go there. Is primarily the alcohol sales, right? It's the food and beverage revenues. The alcohol has the highest markups of anything that the restaurants make, and then that goes directly to the state's tax base, and then that's supporting all the the service industry people, which is a big section of people, and so that contribution, it's even if it's kind of indirect, when we do a good job as entertainers, even if we're not necessarily very well known, but we're out there consistently in places and getting people to have a good time and go, oh, we're going to stay for another couple drinks. We're putting money in the state's pocket in a lot of ways. And then the other part of that from a long-term perspective is these days the tourism market has become so much more competitive, and people, when they decide where they're going to go on vacation from the United States, which is the visitors we want that have the most money, they could go to Florida. They could go to the Caribbean. They could go to Mexico. Why spend that extra money to come out to Hawaii? Well, it's because if we can make memories for them, right? My mom told me, like, I've seen you do a lot of this. You're really not in the business of making music. You're in the business of making memories for people. When that couple that comes out for their 20th anniversary and you play their song and they get up in front of you on a small stage and they slow dance in the moonlight and they're coming back. You know what I mean? And that contribution, I think, needs to be understood by a wider group of people that like, hey, what we're doing is actually pretty important. It's not just, oh, you're just out there playing music for fun. The next part that we touched on is that the economic compensation of our work has been heavily diluted relative to all the inflationary pressures. So in that golden era, we had those showrooms, you had paid sound people, you had less of that in this sort of silver era, but there was still a buzz, there was energy, radio mattered, and you didn't have as many competing distractions.
There were places to play.
Yeah, and people cared more about it, and you could sell CDs, you could attract more of a following, and you would have more loyal fans that didn't have as much else to do with their attention and their money, and you could capture more of that market share in a meaningful way. And then, don't even get us started on the cost of food, insurance, gas, to maintain and purchase our equipment, the money that you need to rent a home, let alone save a down payment. And then if you want to have, hey, like a space like this that you record and produce stuff in, it's not cheap.
No, it's
you know
not.
What I mean? It's expensive to just maintain a place to have your equipment even to just have a place that you're going to set up and dedicate to, I'm going to produce music from here kind of thing, right? Like there's an inherent overhead cost in just having that space set up. And so that's another part of it. And then the third major challenge is that being a musician today and wanting to earn a living at it means something very different than it used to, because the music these days is now just a marketing tool. It's not really the product. So you used to be able to record something and then have that song kind of blow up, and then you would actually make a decent amount of money off of selling your records. Yeah. You know what I mean? One example is somebody that I was fortunate enough to work with a long time ago was Barry Flanagan from Hawai. They're still selling music. Mm-hmm. They're still selling CDs. It's still considered legend. And if you could get in at that ground level back when Apple stock was cheap, so to speak, you can still be reaping a benefit. But nowadays, it's very difficult to imagine that you're going to record that album, and there's still people that are out there recording great music and that are making that investment to create it, but it's not getting the kind of reach that it used to, and it's not paying them the same kinds of residuals. If you could have written or even covered those hit songs back in the golden and silver eras, you could amass a multi-generational following, and you could leverage that today for big money. You know what I mean? And now we're in this world of 360 deals with like music companies and stuff like that. So what is that?
Explain what a 360.
A 360 deal is what the record labels figured out they needed to do with artists in order to make something off of it, which is we the record company will sign you, the artist, and then all of your different revenue streams from social media, from merchandise, from this, from that, whatever it is that we can find a way to put your brand on and sell, we get a piece of the entire, all 360 degrees of the circle that is you, the artist.
Yeah, not just I see.
So what that does to us as artists is it means if you actually want to like go make like a big, not just a living, but a killing off of this kind of thing, you yourself have got to be the product. You yourself have got to be the brand, and you've got to be, and that's a lot of work. You're out there selling yourself. You got to be, it's just social media. Do you know how much time it can take to make consistent social media content and pump it out? Dude,
I have the same problem with the clothing industry.
Right.
There's so many brands out there that you got to compete with now.
Yeah.
And you got to promote and market not just the product that you're making, but you got to figure out a way to get it out there and get seen now with social media.
On 12 or 13 different channels.
Exactly.
And each of them, you want to have some kind of daily, make sure you're feeding that algorithm so you stay relevant.
And for me, I'm an old guy. I can't stand doing that. I'm just tired of doing that kind of stuff.
It's not my natural, I got into this because I loved the feel of the music. Yeah. And it's changed. So this brings me to sort of, okay, what do we do about it? Right?
Yes, okay.
Like, can we come back to the golden era? No. Can we even bring back the silver era? Sadly, probably not. But we could have let's call it the Bitcoin era, like a digital sheen to it. And so some of the points and I'm going to say that a lot of this came from the group. I did post some things in the group asking our members for feedback and contributions and promising to keep things. Actually, I should say even a lot of the problems, challenges that I mentioned, some of which I didn't mention for political niceties' sake. I'm keeping everybody's suggestions anonymous unless they wanted to be identified otherwise. Because again, I'm just here sort of speaking on behalf of a larger group of us because it sort of needed to be done, and I hope to be the first in a series of others like me that will come on and articulate more of this.
You know, at one point, sorry to interject, but at one point, I remember the HTA getting involved with the music industry and helping promote music, right? And then it stopped, right? When Nick Kawakami guys were talking about it,
you know what's
right?
funny? Yeah, because, well, not HTA, but HJT, the Hawaii Japan.
Oh, it was the Japan one.
Well, yeah, because I remember right before COVID, they were working with her to promote Hawaii to Japan. And we had this whole thing that was going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And then COVID, and then they're like, "Oh, that's it. We're not." And
did you guys explore like reviving some type of thing like that?
I haven't necessarily heard of that particular issue. I do know from experience of a personal friend from the now defunct Island Club and formerly Honolulu Club, this nice guy named Masa I would always see in the sauna. He was a Japanese entertainment company coordinator for events here in Hawaii. And so he would come to the place late at night because that was lunch break for Japan. And he was telling me, "Oh, Bidi, very hard. It's," you know, he's like saying like it hasn't come back the way that it did because it hit the economy there, you know, in a rough way.
Yeah, their yen is not had the best time. Yeah.
But they love it, you know. I mean,
but you know, back in the 90s, there was like, you know, Kyle, you make a good point. The tourism authority, the state, used to do a lot of events. You know, the whole
you guys played the rooftop at Alamana to thousands and thousands of people. Right.
And that was all city sponsored. So maybe that was a Harris thing.
I don't know.
That's actually one of the points that I came up with.
Okay. Sorry. We're cutting.
So I'm just going to say, no, it's okay. Here. So I feel like one of the things that could do is, I said, it feels like a long shot, but maybe some form of legislation.
Yep.
Because we do subsidize our film industry with tax credits. So maybe why not some of our other entertainment industry sectors? Support for venues to pay artists a more livable wage and the extra necessary to sustain duos instead of solos, as well as marketing cost subsidies. Right, because we want, when these venues succeed.
Maybe you could give a tax credit to
you could do a tax credit to the venue
that support.
That's one potential.
Great idea.
Some kind of government support in terms of equal promotion for our gigs at all levels, not just the ticketed events at Hawaii Theater that get the paid promotions. Like an office that would stay up on everybody who's playing and where they are all night, all throughout at least the city, if not maybe the wider state. That you can go to a directory of here's all the places you can get live entertainment.
People have tried that. That's tough.
From the small, but so that's why I'm saying maybe it should come from the city.
Yeah. Well, it's more the musicians that are I mean, you know, because you gotta trust the musicians to give you that information, and most of them
or the venue,
including myself, are not.
You could
not
promote
up on that
group venue thing.
I guess so. Yeah.
Another thing that in the legislation sector that could be helpful, we don't have any laws out here that regulate anything having to do with pay rates or specifically agency or manager commissions or conflicts of interest or exclusionary practices, anything that we can do that incentivizes transparency in pay and more of a free market could be helpful. And I don't want to go too deep into that, but like I said, even some kind of tax credit that could help the working artist themselves to help with offsetting their costs or even to help with the costs of producing more music. You know, like if there was a tax credit that allowed somebody that was producing an album to be able to get something back.
There actually was something like that. It was a technology, it wasn't a music based, but I remember in the 2000s, because we were doing Kiahivai, there was some kind of tax credit if you did any kind of digital medium.
There was a high technology incentive.
Because it was an incentive to get technology here or something like that. I do remember that.
So there's a precedent for this.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Another point would be sort of financial transparency or pay structure changes with the venues that hire us. So kind of like you said about the days of back when there used to be like a percentage of bar sales. It's called gain sharing. So you could take the regular standard pay rate that they're giving and you could lower that to still a reasonable minimum base rate and then have a target that the venue has to hit in terms of sales to sort of cover their end. And then anything over and above that revenue target then becomes a regular percentage that you pay to the artist. So that you have a partial, you know, most of your basic minimums are covered with a standard pay rate that you're going to get. Say it's 150, say it's 200, but then you have the potential when the venue does really well that night.
Right.
I have a question for you guys. Gig artists like you guys, what is the percentage of gig artists like you guys actually have a management that takes care of the booking and stuff, or is 90% of
I'd say
is the individual artists themselves doing it now?
It's
because
90% the individual artist.
I think it's even higher than 90%.
Really?
The actual managers out there are, I only know off the top of my head of maybe two. One of them is semi-retired. That are here in state. Now there's a lot more booking agencies. But they're not necessarily there for the sake of the artist development per se. I mean, they have an incentive to make sure that works.
You know what's happening actually is there are management companies that are out of state that are coming and picking up talent here, and then trying to
bring them to the mainland.
Well, I mean, just they have like an in-house marketing team, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I want him to be able to finish because we're running out of time.
I'm almost there.
Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
The other point, no, this is a great conversation, and this is why I'm here. I really want to make sure that we raise awareness about these issues because I know a lot of industry insiders see this, and I want there to be like, oh yeah, I'm hoping this gives other people ideas, and that more people will help join this group, or even just have this conversation amongst themselves, and then it starts a little bit of a wave. Along the financial transparency section is knowing both ways somehow what the artist and the venue each need to make this work. Because I was part of a discussion in this group where I was clear to be able to say, hey, guys, these venues that hire us are our partners. They're not oppressing us. You know what I mean? And they have been taking, there was an article that the owner of Giovanni Pastrami's, where I play every Thursday, who was recently, I think he had to leave because he had so many businesses he was running, was the president of the Hawaii Restaurant Association. They did this article in some local media outlet about how Rainbow Drive-In has had to close on Mondays, and like, hey, your plate lunch is going up to $19, and here's why. Because all of those inflationary pressures and costs, the restaurant industry has gotten hit bad.
Yeah.
I mean, bad. And so they're up against a lot of the same forces, and what we're there to do is to help them succeed. So if there was some way that we could kind of get together, and it wasn't, I'm not saying that it's adversarial now, but it's kind of like they want to get away with paying you as little as they can to sort of get the job done. If there was a way for us to be able to understand, what do you guys really need? And was there a way for them to understand what we as the artists kind of need? Maybe there's a bridge that could be built there to help a little bit more of an equitable arrangement, and to even just foster that greater sense of, hey, we're partners in success with each other, and we're there to help everybody do better. We want our venues to sell well. We want to be able to have that promote ourselves as the artists. We want people to come there to see us, you know what I mean? And hope to drive more of a following, and to get those private party opportunities that people go, wow, you're great. Are you available for my kids' graduation?
Yeah.
So those are some issues. And the third and sort of final solution that I came up with for now is that since actual unionization at this point is probably not super realistic unless there's something I don't know or something that somebody changes, we can just associate.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea of this group, is it's an association where we can have aloha, and we can encourage discussions and cooperation to reach our common goals, because they say that a rising tide floats all boats. So if we band together and we regularly communicate, it helps us feel a little bit less alone in our struggles, because when you're all doing solo gigs now, because they don't pay for cooperation, we're all doing the same thing in the same places at the same time, and we never really see each other, yet we're having kind of the same common experience, and we're all kind of tired. I mean, it takes a lot. And if you're not doing this full time, then you also have another job, and it's like that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. So by sharing information and bringing attention both to the negative situations, but also mostly to try to help with sharing positive experiences and things that
move
can
things
work
in the right direction,
and things that can help each other's growth, we can try to raise the value of what we're doing for all of us. Because if we do that well, it's going to, like I said, I think it only has the potential to help the state's larger economy in ways that could have huge ripple effects in terms of maybe bringing back tourism in a more serious way. If we were to be able to feature to the world that we have some really awesome entertainment offerings.
Yeah.
You know, come back to Hawaii and come listen to and see what we have to offer.
How many members do you have in your Facebook page right now? Currently?
Right now we have 357.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, it could be more. And I think the question is how many artists, like there's like a couple of other Facebook groups. There's like Musicians of Hawaii Network that it doesn't have very strict entry requirements. And I think there's a few thousand people in that. But we wanted to make it like, hey, you got to show us that you're seriously doing this as a job, you know, and that you're really like part of the scene. And so it, like I said, it would be probably more like 800 members if we didn't have such strict confidentiality requirements.
Well, maybe this will help grow followers.
Yeah, and we really want people that come into this to participate. Introduce yourself, share your ideas, share your stories. You know, we want to help. If you're interested in becoming an administrator or a moderator, you know, send us a message, indicate that, and one of us will reach out to you because we really want to grow this for the greater good.
Awesome.
Well, on that note, we have to ask our last question.
Yes. If I was on a desert island
if you're on
and I
a
had to
desert
pick
island.
3 albums, I finally came up with my answers for this last night with someone else's help. Radiohead's OK Computer.
Okay, all right.
Sublime's self-titled album, Sublime.
Oh, that's one of my
That's a good
favorites.
early.
It's a really good one. And because you have to think about this, there better not be any skipping this song on the album.
Yeah,
you got to use all of these.
Sure.
And I'm guessing you can't do any greatest hits because that's cheating.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third and final one that I really had to think over because I wanted to represent different genres for myself would be Prince's Purple Rain.
Ooh.
Oh,
That whole
is a
album.
good choice.
That's You've only got 9 songs on there, but there's some bangers.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them are really weird. You know, Computer Blue is it's a strange song. But those would be my 3 albums.
Great choice.
Thank you.
Well, Billy, thanks, man. I hope that this venture for you goes well. I can't see how more music in the islands would hurt. I think, you know. And
thank you for having me. Thank
we
you
got to
for
be able
letting me
to support these guys. So
share
whatever
the
we can do
platform.
too.
I really appreciate it. If you want to find out more about me and what I do, check out my newly revamped website. It's at billysage5.com. That's BILLYSAGE and the number 5.com.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, man, and we'll see you all later. Have a great rest
Mahalo.
of November.
Take care.
Aloha.